everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome to this Illinois CMS webinar. My name is Molly Cook with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's topic is best practices in security assessments. As a reminder, currently everyone on the call is on mute. So if you have questions as the webinar proceeds, please post your questions in the chat box and we will address those at the end of the webinar. A reminder that this webinar will be recorded and the contents of the recording will be available to you. In an effort to be as accessible as possible, this webinar will be offering closed captioning as well as the recording. At the end of the webinar, each attendee will receive a link to a survey about today's webinar, and you'll also receive a follow-up email tomorrow. Please provide feedback and any suggestions you have to help improve upcoming webinars. Another reminder, if you have a faulty internet connection or would prefer to call in, you can do so by calling into this webinar using the phone number in your original registration email. I will also post that number in the chat box in just a moment. So I want to start with just two polling questions just to know our audience. The first question is, which partner do you represent? And the second question is, where is your local area? And we'll give you about 20 to 30 seconds to answer those. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. It looks like we have Title I partners and other WIOA and stakeholder partners. And we have a lot from Central Illinois here, and then a group from Southern Illinois as well. So welcome all, and I would like to turn it over to Mitch Parrish to introduce our presenters for today.
Thank you, Molly. Good afternoon. My name is Mitch Parrish, and over the past several months, state agency directors, legal teams, CMS, and our interagency technical assistance team have been working in collaboration to issue guidance for Illinois American Job Center's reopening efforts. Through this process, we've been working very closely with Joel Vieira. He's the CMS Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and Joe Gillespie, which is the CMS Chief Security Officer. I'm now going to turn it over to Joel and Joe to discuss the background of the WIOA notice and some security assessment best practices for local workforce areas around the state.
Thank you, Mitch. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Mr. Parrish pointed out, my name is Joel Vieira. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer with the Department of Central Management Services. Our department provides facilities, vehicles, contracting, and other support services to various state agencies throughout the state. One of the things that we do is we provide security services. I'm joined also by Joe Gillespie, our Chief Security Officer. With a quick overview on this presentation, I won't read everything here, but it's pretty basic. So the job centers were closed because of COVID-19. Lots of job centers closed since spring of 2020, and many sites have reopened. And obviously the job centers provide critical services to lots of folks out there. So reopening is important for everyone, and it involves a lot of coordination. Security assessment is an important step for each location prior to reopening. So this presentation provides a very general overview of some of the key elements that we at Central Management Services use and that organizations may wish to consider. Each security assessment should be narrowly tailored to make sure that it's commensurate with individual operations, missions, and location specific. And some additional information by way of context. There was a WIOA notice of safe reopening American job centers. That was issued on June 24th. Then on June 25th, there was a webinar to sort of discuss the notice and the required form for documenting an American Job Center reopening plan. The notice indicated that some American Job Centers required CMS security assessment because these locations were leased by the state and or had state employees at these locations. Some American Job Centers that are not leased by the state and that do not have state employees on site are not required to have a CMS conducted assessment. These locations, however, still need to document that security of the American Job Centers was considered as part of their reopening plans. This webinar, again, provides CMS best practices and resources to support partners in considering the security of their physical centers before reopening. If your job center has already reopened, then today's webinar can help support the documentation of your American Job Center's reopening plan. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to our Chief of Security, Mr. Joe Gillespie, who will walk us through the remainder of this presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate everyone taking the time to attend this seminar, as obviously security is probably one of the most important things that everyone needs to realize that they have a part in. So I do appreciate everyone taking the time to be here with us today, and hopefully you can take bits and pieces of this information that you're going to be provided and hopefully implement that. But more importantly, at least have the knowledge to move forward, as whether you're already open and implemented or whether the site needs to open, so you can have some best practices. And these best practices are industry standards that come forth that we apply an everyday security terminology. So I'm going to try to take all the uncommon terminology out of the presentation and talk in plain English. So hopefully we'll move forward. And once again, if you have any questions, I know the chat box will be open and we'll be happy to get to those at the end. But as we start, I just would like to talk about how I do a physical security assessment. I break it down into three portions. I review the physical features of any building, and then I review the functions and protocols, that would be the policy and procedures that are within the facility. And then I look at external factors beyond control of anyone, and that would be things that happen outside because of the neighborhood we're in, the environment that may be consistent. We might be in a shopping center, or we might be in a structure that has external factors that are uncontrolled by obviously the tenant. And then we'll look at the overall location of the facility, and then we'll move forward and we'll take all that information and we come through. So today what I want to do is, obviously I cannot come out and do everyone's security assessment, though I would love to, but time and things don't allow that. So I want to give you guys a brief overview on how to conduct that security assessment on your own. And it's not a difficult process. It's very easy. It's taking a little things and just making sure that we do what we say we're going to do. And in general, it's common sense as we look at it. And I don't expect everyone to be a security assessor or a security assessment officer, but I do expect everyone to have security practices in mind. So as we move forward, keep that in mind, that a lot of the things that I'll discuss today are common sense. Most of them are things that we already do, and it's second nature to all of us. Security assessments came really, really big right after 9/11. And I say 9/11 when we obviously had the horrific bombings of our buildings in the Pentagon and in another area where the aircraft went down, which I'm lucky to say that this week I am on vacation and I'm visiting all those sites. Happened to be in Virginia today. Took the time out because this is super important to me in CMS and IDS to make sure that all the partner agencies got this. So I was more than happy to do so. But looking at what security assessments are doing and what we use them for, it's basically to look at our internal process, our external factors that are applied to the process, And most importantly, make sure that we're doing things safely. And it could be little tiny things. So we'll move through that as we come through. Like I said, we'll talk with the internal processes. And then we'll look at you will need to look at the facility and look at external things. So we'll go from there, and we'll keep moving forward. Once again, be happy to answer any questions at the end as we move through this, and I'll keep it as plain English as I can. So security assessments. And in the security assessments, we really want to look at things that we want to talk about, and how we move forward with those things, and use some of the best practices that we have found, not only at the state, but understanding that you guys are not state facilities. So these are general commercial security practices, how we would move forward. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what we'd like all of the partner agencies to think about doing is create or update their existing incident policies and procedures. Once again, I know those are going to be different for every location. If you don't have policies and procedures and need some basic guidelines, please let us know that we can assist with that. Obviously, we can't write them for you, but we can definitely give you some good starting points and some guidelines to move forward with on those policies and procedures. But obviously, they have to be each and every one of your own organization's policies and procedures. Second, we want to talk about updating existing emergency plans or create those plans. And these plans are hand in hand with your policies and procedures, but these are what we call an emergency operation plan. And these are plans of what can we do, what can we talk about in the event of an emergency. And we can put these things in policies or in plans, and have them ready to access in the event that we have an emergency. Also, we want to talk about emergency evacuation plans. Every one of our buildings should have an evacuation plan, or every one of your buildings, excuse me, should have an evacuation plan. And that plan, needs to be looked at to make sure that things didn't change. Internal construction of the building. We didn't put a desk in front of a doorway. We didn't put up a partition that precludes, guests and or staff from getting to an emergency exit. So we want to make sure that we look at those. How often should emergency plans and evacuation plans be updated? At least annually, but definitely reviewed after any unusual incident that may have occurred, to make sure that after we have that incident that may have occurred, and this could have been a hostile client or customer, it could have been a fire alarm that accidentally got activated. Whenever we have something like this, we want to make sure that we review our plans to make sure that we followed our plans. And if we can't follow our plans, we want to update our plans. These types of plans are what I call living, breathing documents. These plans need to be looked at and updated, obviously, as periodically as necessary. Because if we're not doing what we say we do in our plans, then let's not have it in our plans. Another key factor that I find in most security assessments is we need to create key control. And what I mean by key control, and is the physical keys that are issued to your staff need to be inventoried. We need to know who has them. We need to make sure that when we issue hard keys out to people, that we track, and so we have accountability for those keys. And that goes hand in hand with access control procedures and making sure that we have accountability. That comes into play with file storage. I know that the partner agencies deal with clients that we're getting a lot of secured information that is primed for identity theft. So we need to make sure that we're keeping those records securely locked in facilities, within our facilities, and make sure that access and control to those records are those who have the need to see it or the need to know. They just can't, the cleaning staff can't come in there and take a peek at all these records. So we need to make sure we come up with good key control, access control policies and or procedures, and then come up with SOPs or standing operating procedures, how we're going to implement that throughout the day to make everything, super safe. Another legit product that we come about is if the buildings do have guards, and I mean security guards, and even if they don't, I think I should take just a quick second to say that I don't know, and I have not reviewed everyone's job descriptions, with all the partner agencies. But I'm going to assume, and I brushed on this earlier in my presentation, that I'm going to assume that everyone in their job description has a segment that says any other duties as required. Well, in this day and age, with our changing climates and the uncertainties that are happening within the United States, we are all now security. Whether you have a security guard or not, we all have to act in that security mindset. So we need to make sure that we're training our staff who is either acting as security or, dealing with security aspects of every office that is out there. We need to make sure that we're training them in de-escalation and crowd management and in diffusing aggressive situations. There's great training online. There's great training that CMS is going to put out, which I think we can probably get copies to you so you can access this training. There's great training outside of the state of Illinois on de-escalation, on how to deal with people. So make sure that we're training our staff on how to do that and diffuse situations when they arise in our facilities. Obviously, we talked about existing policy and procedures. One of the greatest things that could assist law enforcement in the aid of us within our facilities, keeping them safe, is we need to create a policy that is related to barring individuals from our facilities. Now, the reason we need to do this is because in the laws that changed in Illinois, we need to make sure that we can keep those people that we have no need to have back at our facilities. We can make other arrangements for them, whether it's via the telephone or whatever. But for security purposes, if there's someone that has made a scene, has done something of what meets the threshold that you guys would all come up with to bar that individual, we need to make sure that we have good policies and procedures on barring individuals from the premises. And I know that gets a little tricky, but I think the outside organizations and our partner agencies can share some information on that back and forth. Not saying that they should be barred from everything, but as we move forward, we need to make sure that we're communicating this with all our partner agencies on a conference call such as this, just so we can work together and make sure that we move forward with making sure that we all have the same general policies in place, kind of help. Another thing that I've noticed when we did a lot of the security walkthroughs throughout my tenure is dealing with intrusion alarms. If our organizations have intrusion alarms, we need to make sure that we have good practices on making sure that we can hold those people who are using them accountable. So individual access code numbers are greatly desired. If you can't do that and you do use one generic number, obviously we need to make sure that we change those numbers as we issue those numbers out to those key people who have access to intrusion alarms, at least annually. If not annually, I would love to see it more often, but at least at every time that we have a departure of an employee that knew the code, just to make sure that we can deal with those alarm procedures and make sure that we're keeping fresh and up-to-date information. Keeping people who don't need to be within our facilities out is very important. That's why we have intrusion alarms. So we need to make sure that we're doing our part as organizations to keep those numbers confidential. And then when we use those numbers, or we have an employee that either departs or retires or resigns, we need to make sure that we're changing those numbers. One of the other things that I would create and stress, that the things that I've just talked about, and I know it's a long list, and we'll make sure that this PowerPoint is available to everyone. We need to make sure that we do these things potentially before we reopen. And I know that some of these partner agencies have already reopened, so we'd love them to make a quick assessment to make sure that all those things are in place. To make sure that we're providing a safe environment for the clients that we serve. And then most importantly, the staff that we have on site. Joel, if you go to the next slide, please. Most important thing I think that we can all do right now, not only because of COVID-19, but because of the overall security environment that we're in, is require that all clients make appointments for services. This sounds drastic to everyone when I talk to them about it, because it's something totally different than we're used to, not only on the IDS side, and the Secretary of State side, we're always used to allowing people just to come congregate and wait in line for those services. I am a big fan of appointment only for services to all our clients. And if I had my way, I would suggest it from here on out. I love the availability to pre-screen my clients before they get here. If I know who's coming in tomorrow, I know what kind of staff I have to have on. I know what kind of things and what kind of issues I may deal with for how many clients are allowed in at any given time. I can pre-identify my clients so I know who I'll be dealing with, so I can have appropriate paperwork if needs to be handwritten, pre-done. And I also can manage my staff better by knowing how many appointments I'm going to allow. So I'm a big fan of appointments. I know it's something outside of the box that we normally don't deal with IDS and our partner agencies, but I believe it is the safest way for us to open our offices. Number one, we can limit the number of bodies within our facilities for the spread of communicable diseases such as COVID, but it also gives us the availability to manage our staff as well, to know what we may or may not need. So I'm a big fan of that. So I know it's sometimes outside of the box, but let's look at that and see if we can't adjust and maybe move within a direction for that. One of the other things I'd like to do, and I noticed this as I was walking around facilities with and without the state, I'd like to be able to publicly identify our staff that is our staff. So if you're a paid employee from one of the organizations, they should have name tags. They should be readily identified, but also our senior workers and or volunteers, but our senior workers. And the reason I want to do this is most people that have issues with the organization tend not to take that out on our senior volunteers or workers. They tend to save that frustration for the staff members. And that's truly where that aggravation from our client shouldn't be going to the senior workers who are there to try to assist them. So if we can look at that, see if we can identify those workers in some way, that would be a great task as we move forward to assist in the flow and to assist in some of that aggravation, they don't need to deal with as they're helping us out. So we want to make sure that we're helping them out as well. I also would love to see IDs for all workers within a facility. That way people who come in know they're supposed to be there. And we as staff members know they're supposed to be there as well. If you're fortunate enough and you have security within the staff and they're on site at the facilities, we need to make sure that we refine the guard and service post orders. If you don't have security, once again, I talked about it earlier, where all of our staff is considered security now. We need to make sure that we have good guidelines on staff de-escalation things, and we also need to make sure that we're training and making sure that what we're asking our security and or our staff to do is put out in writing, as documented as best as it can be for your organizations, for therefore everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing. Another big thing I would love to see, if you have a receptionist or a check-in window, I'm a big fan of business class two-way radios. Two-way radios help within the communication of the office. We can let people know, we can give two-way radios to a receptionist and or security up front. Managers throughout the facility can have a radio with them, so they have a way to communicate back and forth. If there is an issue, they also have a way to communicate back and forth if they need help or if there is an unusual occurrence. So two-way radios are a great plus when you look at your assessment on how you communicate within your facility. So if you don't have them and you have a way to get them, please do so, because they make communication that much more efficient within a facility. On the exterior of the facilities, I would love to see striped safety zones with wording, that it's a striped zone, and maybe it could be blue in color. I am a big fan of blue in color because it's not used for many other things. But putting this in front of the building entrance, that this is an organization name and there's no loitering or trespassing. That just puts everyone on notice as they walk into the organization that they're here to do what they need to do, and that's get the services that they're looking to get, and then the help they need. But they can't loiter, they can't hang out. This isn't somewhere where we really need to be. If we put that on the floor, they realize that, they see it as they walk over. Just gives a general notice to all of the clients that are coming in that we're here to conduct business, and not literally hang out. Not only do I like that on the entranceway painted, I also like signs on the exterior of the building that, puts the organization's name, and then no loitering or trespassing. It just puts everyone on notice that, hey, we're here to conduct your business. We're here to help you. But it's not necessarily where we want people to hang out, because we want people to be able to move in and out of the facility freely and not be bothered by other people. So looking at the exterior as well, I would like everyone to walk outside, look at the exterior of their facility. If you have a lot of shrubbery and bushes throughout the facility and you can't see behind them, well, sight lines are very important. And those sight lines, as we look at them, we want to make sure that we can see. So we trim up shrubs and trim down shrubs so we can see someone standing behind shrubbery. And if we can't see them, we can trim them up so we can see their feet as well. It doesn't give a potential bad person or a potential person that doesn't want to do the right thing. It doesn't give them a hiding spot. This is also great when the local municipal police or county police do their drive-bys. They can shine their spotlights. They can see behind all the shrubbery. They can see above it, so they can see people lingering around who aren't supposed to be there, who might be trying to break in. So if we can clean the shrubs up, it's a great thing for both us during daytime operations and nighttime operations, when the local municipal police are driving by and doing their security checks, as they do every night. They'll be able to see up in the building to make sure nobody is loitering around. Tree trimming is also very important. If you bring the trees down, especially if they're growing up over the roof, I don't like to have, in a sense, we're giving people ladders when they climb up the trees. So if we can trim those down so they don't, or at least away from the building, so they don't have access to the roof. So that's very, very important as well. Next slide, please, sir. Some of the other things I would love to see within the facilities is installing ceiling mounted monitors as you enter. And on those enters, we can have, hey, look, you're on camera if we have cameras provided. And we'll get into that later, because I'm a big fan of, obviously, cameras, security cameras. So, but if we can have monitors as you walk in saying, look at me, I'm on camera, that puts everyone on notice that they're being watched. And it's very important. Also, install flat screen monitors in the lobbies of our facilities. This is probably the most important thing we can do, because we have now a way to communicate with our clients on upcoming events within our facility, on other partner agencies that may be assisting us, services that they're providing. And we can put this scrolling on flat monitors as you walk in. It's just an information super highway for people to look at as they're waiting for their appointment, or they're hanging out before or after they go. It's a way for us to communicate with our clients on what we need them to do. It also is a way to put out, hey, we need you to have this form of ID when you get here, or this information. We can give our client the instructions as they're getting ready to see our service providers. We can give them the instructions they need. We can tell them what we need. We can also give them other important information. It's just a great way to communicate with our clients as we see them. Obviously, those could be programmed weekly, monthly, however the organization feels fit to put that information out to the clients, and what may change. We can, put updating information on them, and obviously allow our clients to have that information that we may not have gotten to them in our, our appointment window, where we may have forgot about, and they can see that maybe there's a food bank that's available, or maybe there's a major corporation hiring. Put it on there and get that information out. So very, very productive to put up flat screen monitors as information sources. No different than when you walk into an airport and you walk in and you're looking for your flight information. It's something that everyone's used to seeing and used to having now. You walk into a restaurant, they have a marquee up with that information of the product they're serving. So if you can put flat screen monitors up, it also, if we do get back to not having appointments and we have a couple people waiting in the lobby, it gives them something to look at and not get, overzealous with the time they've been waiting. They look up at the monitor, they can see the information, it keeps them occupied. So it gives them something to do while they're waiting for their appointment to come up. Another thing, as I walked through a whole bunch of the facilities, I was able to see, and not only because of COVID, obviously I would like everyone to install clear dividers at the service counters if they already haven't done so. But even after COVID is done, a clear divider, as it's mounted and it's put in between our client and our organization's staff, it provides a barrier. And I know it doesn't give us that homey feel, but it provides a barrier. And that barrier, sometimes, even though it's glare, they realize it's there, is just enough to keep the people on the backside of that barrier. When our clients may become agitated or upset, that barrier is just enough to keep the bubble space aspect. It keeps the client away from our service provider in the event that they're getting upset. It's just enough there to make it where it's an obstacle. And that's what we're trying to create. We want to just make the ease of access from our client to our service provider personnel. We want to keep them as safe as possible. And that barrier does enough. So even when COVID's over, I know we all want to be back to handshakes and everything else, but distance is our friend whenever we have an encounter. So I'm a big fan of those dividers even after COVID. So if you don't have them, please put them up for COVID, but consider keeping them up for future operations, because they do put a barrier between our clients and us, and space is our friend. Reconfigure seating. If we get back to where we are bringing in people, and hopefully we do it by appointment so we can manage those people, but reconfigure the seating areas in our lobby. Having 50 seats in an area that shouldn't have 10 seats is a horrible thing. We want to give people their space. We want to make sure that people are not climbing over people to get in and out of rows of seatings in lobbies, especially when it's hot out, especially when they're agitated. So if we can keep people away from people, we do a good thing too. Not only is it our responsibility as organizations to protect our staff from our clients from our staff, shouldn't have to say that, and it's our responsibility to protect our clients and our other clients. So we want to make sure that we're giving them ample space to not feel over enclosed and not feel that people are all around them. So we need to reconfigure our seating areas to make sure that they're open, free to move, and not having overcrowdedness. Digital client numbering systems. I'm a big fan of this because it allows those people who are waiting to see forward process. Whether you're going to the deli, whether you're going to the Secretary of State's office, as we move our client boards forward and we move the numbering system forward, everyone sees progress, and that's a great thing because they know that we're moving. Now, however slow that might be, they still see the forward process. So that's a great thing to put in if we can. They're fairly inexpensive, and it gives that ability to show that we're moving in a forward direction for everyone. Public address systems, whether this is an intercom or something through our pre-established phone systems that may be within our facilities, we need a way to communicate with our staff, and we need a way to communicate with the clients in the event that we have severe weather coming through, we have an incident within the facility, we need a way to give instructions. A public address system is the way to do this, especially in our bigger buildings. Some of our partner agencies have huge buildings. Standing up and talking to people is not very easily done because there's offices and there's dividers. So public address system that we can get in, communicate with our staff that there's something going on, or the entire building. No different than a fire alarm. When you pull it on your way out, it rings throughout the entire building. We need to have the way to make sure that there could be other incidents that may happen that we need to alert our public that may be in, or the members of our staff that may be within the building. So public address systems are very, very important. Once again, on the inside, I would love to see additional signage hung throughout facilities with your organization's name, saying that, this organization, people who need to be here are here for legitimate organizational business, and there is no loitering or trespassing within that. So it should be in the waiting rooms, it should be in the bathrooms, hallways, and other locations that you guys see fit, where clients might see or be at. You can go ahead to the next slide, please, sir. Before I get into access control and cameras, I do want to talk about front end and back end of the facility. I know it's not on the slide, and I apologize for that. I'm a big fan of keeping most of my staff, or any of my staff, and I refer to your staff as my staff as I'm talking, I apologize. But if we can keep our clients in the front of the house and not bring them into the back of the house where the other staff may be, I'm a big fan of this. And God forbid that there is ever an incident, but in the event that there would be an incident, if I can keep 70% of my staff safe because they're behind the back wall or behind the counter, and I have 30% of my staff up front, at least I know I only have to deal with the 30% of the staff who's in harm's way if I can keep the other 70% safe. So I am not a fan of bringing clients back into offices. I'm a fan of the staff getting up, walking up front, and creating a secure environment up there. And I understand that we deal with confidential information. If we can make offices that are open view, should never close the door with a client and an employee in it. We should always have someone else who has the availability to see into that office, so we can look at that, and we always have a witness. Times have changed drastically, so we want to make sure that we protect ourselves, and not only protect ourselves and our staff, but we got to protect our clients as well. It's our job to protect them as well. So it's a two-way street. If we can look into these offices and see these people as they're working, if we can keep them on the front side of the house, makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. And another one of those things that we need to talk about is access control systems. Hirsch is a big trade name. There's a whole bunch of other ones, but if we can control access into our facilities with card access, and those are, some of you are familiar with what I'm talking about. It's a RF tag that's in a credit card style looking card. Could be in a key fob, could be on a keychain. And what that does is it has a unique sequential number that is assigned to the card holder. No different than when you go into a hotel room. For those who, swipe in and out of a room, those are mag stripes, but it is a card access control system. So we have accountability, who's here when they get here, and who's in our facility at any given time. And those are all huge management tools as well. We can track our staff and things of that nature as well. We know they're here on time. So just a big fan of those. And then it also does not allow people who don't have access to the facility to be in there. We can set these systems up where we can track it for maintenance to come in at in particular times, cleaning staffs to come in, so we can track the times, and then we know they were here. So I'm a big fan of card access. So we can assist in any way in helping you guys get that set up, let us know. I talked about it earlier, but closed circuit TV or cameras. Cameras are great deterrents, and they also give people who are working in the back end of the office the ability to see the front end or other important areas of the office and visibility. And if we can set up systems that record, it obviously gives us the ability to go back and look at things or look at incidents that may have happened, so we can learn from them, number one, but obviously use them in the event if we need to track people down or so on and so forth, or turned over to law enforcement if they need them. Next slide. Security checklist. And before we start, I just want to make sure that everyone realizes that's on the call, that the security checklist that is on this PowerPoint looks very familiar to the pre-opening checklist that was sent out earlier that needs to be sent back to CMS. And so just don't confuse the two, but they look very similar. So I want to make sure that I just made a note of that we have two different lists, because I've cannibalized that pre-opening checklist to make it a security checklist as well. And as we move through the security checklist, you'll see that there's a couple different sizes. There's a checklist on the layout, and then there's a checklist on the entrances and the exits and so forth. I'm not going to go over that checklist per se, because that's there for you guys to look as you walk through and do your security assessments. I kind of gave you all the reasons why to do it, but this is to help you as you walk through and you do your security assessments, to give you a list of things to look at. And on these checklists, there's simple things such as, what you looked at and how you did it. So you can go ahead and look at this list, and we'll make sure that those are forwarded out to you. And just make sure that you walk through this before reopening. If you already reopened, please do it as soon as possible. It just gives a well-rounded thing to check these things before we move forward. And then obviously make sure that we have the plans or the policies that are coordinate with these things. But once again, I want to remind everyone on the call that this is not the same checklist that you had to turn in. I believe it was due last week. I could be wrong on that, and someone will correct me at the end of this if that is the case. But there's two forms. One had to be turned back in for review before reopening, and then this one is a guide to help those people who already haven't reopened to turn that back in to conduct their security checklist walkthrough. Joel, if you can go to the next slide. And this is more of the checklist. If you can go to the next one as well, sir. This one here, obviously, I'm a big fan of management looking at things and making sure they were done. So this is a security checklist for supervision or supervisors and the people who are in the means of supervision. Obviously, we need to make sure that our supervisors are checking in on our staff. We need to make sure that our supervisors are making sure that what we said we did, we did. We need to hold those things accountable. So if our staff went through and did a security assessment and walk through, we need to make sure that the supervisor needs to make sure that if we have security on site, that we looked at their post orders, we revised their post orders. And if we don't have security on site and we have a receptionist, that we made sure that our receptionist got the training in de-escalation, got the training in how to protect and deal with things. So the supervisor checklist is that, and it's saying that if we have the training to put forward that we said we did it, the supervisor needs to make sure that we did do it. We also need to make sure that the supervisor is there to make sure that the signage was put up if we said we had signage put up. The supervisors need to make sure that whatever we said we did in our checklist, that it was done. These checklists are great. They're easy to walk through and say, yeah, we have this, we have this, we have this. And I'm a big fan of checklists, but the checklist is only as good as the supervisor saying, yes, it was done. So the supervisor needs to make sure that these things were done. And that's why I have a supervisor checklist, because we need to make sure that the emergency protocols were in place. The emergency plans that we say we had are done and updated. And then obviously the supervisor needs to make sure that those were done on an annual basis at a bare minimum, but anytime we had an unusual incident, things of that nature, we need to make sure, the supervisor needs to make sure that a protective a PPE, personal protection equipment policy was put into place before reopening. We need to make sure that we had sanitation and cleaning that were done, whether it's an outside janitorial company that comes in or it's staff that's held to do their own areas. We need to make sure that those things are being done on an everyday basis. So the supervisors need to make sure, if we say we're going to have 8 people in our building because of COVID and reopening, that only 8 people are in our building. And that could be clients or a total number. That's obviously needs to be dictated by the organization. But we need to, if we establish that number, which we should all establish, that occupancy number, we need to make sure that that was done. We need to make sure that the signage was hung. So supervisors need to make sure that once we establish our checklist, we establish our plans, supervisors need to reinforce that those things were done, and then hold people accountable for violations if they're not done. Because that's the only way we're going to enforce good overall safety and security plans. You can have the greatest plan in the world. If we don't hold our staff accountable to that plan, the plans aren't going to work. I think that puts us at the next slide.
So I think that's actually the end of the presentation. I want to really thank Mr. Gillespie for taking time out during his vacation to actually participate in the webinar. Mr. Gillespie and folks from IDES did 19 site assessments. So they went to all parts of the state over the much of June. So we want to thank them for all their work, especially Mr. Gillespie, who then had to actually do an individual report for each location. So thank you, Joe, for taking time out during your vacation. Well-deserved vacation, I might add. And with that, I think I'll hand it back to Mitch to see if he wants to add any other notes. Mitch?
Thanks, Joel. I just put in the chat box that the reopening form was due or is due on July 26th. For those local workforce areas that are already currently open, that deadline was given, it was 30 days after the issuance of the WIOA notice. If you have questions or concerns, please feel free to email that website or that email address that's on your screen right now. Regarding the reopening plan, the form, the WIOA notice, or the security assessments, we'll make sure that the right party gets the question, we can answer them. Does anyone else have any questions for today? So Joel or Joe, we have a question from Michelle Griebler, just wondering when they will be able to see completed assessments, if at all. Is there a timeline regarding that?
I'll take that question, Joel. The security assessments have been completed on a draft format, and they've been sent up to IDES, their review, and they're going to need a few weeks to review these. So I don't have a time yet, and I'm sorry for that. It's just, this is a slow moving process. I actually took a week's vacation in the middle here, so I apologize for that. So the overall progress, yes, someday they will be out there. I can't say it's going to be in the next day or tomorrow, but these assessments will ultimately be distributed out. And I believe IDS staff who's on will let you all know when they are available, but it's not going to be in the next few weeks. I can tell you that because I have to finish them and finalize them myself. So I apologize for that. But with that being said, yes, someday, hopefully sooner than later, but it's still going to be a few weeks out. I know that.
Thanks, Joe. And Michelle, and for everyone else that's on the calls, if you're getting close to that 30-day time frame and you need an extension or you need some help on how to finalize your security assessments, again, send questions or concerns to the WIOA plans inbox, and we'll make sure that we follow up with you. And Molly, I think if there's no other questions today, I think that concludes our webinar. And again, I appreciate Joe and Joel's participation in it.
Yes, absolutely. And I am going to put into the chat box right now a link to a follow-up survey from this webinar. You will also receive this survey in an email tomorrow or the next day. But in case you want to take the survey while this is all fresh, it's right there. Feel free. Thank you so much for attending today. Thank you to our presenters. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.